Good afternoon, Alexis Donkin with a 7 News update. Well, it's that time where Perth says goodbye to the Giants. Take a look at these incredible pictures as hundreds of thousands of people say goodbye to the little girl giant and the diver as they board a barge on the Swan River to make their way for Fremantle. By yesterday morning, there were already 400,000 people in the CBD to see the little girl and the diver. Overnight, they were reunited at Langley Park for the first time. There were hundreds of thousands of people here, and again today, the freeways were packed early this morning, and so was public transport. But the people we've spoken to say it was all worth it. Now, we've been here for 3 remarkable days. Join us in our news tonight at 6 for all the highlights and live reports.
Good afternoon, Samantha Jolly with you. Perth has embraced the Giants as our incredible view from the 7 helicopter shows. Hundreds of thousands of people crammed the foreshore to watch the little girl and diver loaded onto a barge for their journey back home via Fremantle. Earlier today, the Giants were part of a special Anzac ceremony at Langley Park. 7 News spoke to a family from the French town where the marionettes are made, who say they're proud to be French.
So it's beautiful, wonderful, and it's crazy to see that we see them in Australia. And we never see them in France.
And we'll have all the best of the Giants with live reports and more tonight at 6.
Hundreds of thousands of people have packed the Perth CBD for a final performance of The Giants. The puppets, created by a French art troupe, travelled around a city park after being reunited last night. It's the third and final day of performance for the marionettes, which cost taxpayers $5 million. But Perth Arts Festival organisers have declared the show a huge success.
Good evening. More than 500,000 people have packed the city to watch The Giants, making the massive show Perth's biggest ever event. Today, the diver and little girl giant paraded around Langley Park together before a grand finale on the river.
On the land and on the water, the people of Perth were going anywhere they could to catch one final glimpse of the Giants.
Now, let's move back.
The little girl giant and diver giant together at last. They were reunited in Langley Park last night. Incredible emotion on their faces. It's hard to believe they're massive marionettes. There was also a special tribute to the traditional owners. Before Perth's giant visitors were ready to rest. And as an estimated crowd of 600,000 people returned this morning, that's how they found the Giants as they waited in anticipation for them to wake.
It's panning out beautifully. It's been kind of an exceptional response, and no one, I don't think even we could have believed the way that people would respond to this performance. It's really captured the public imagination, and we couldn't be more thrilled.
With the flicker of his eyes, it was Diver Giant that woke first. But once she was up, it was the little girl giant that stole the show.
The number of people that are involved in just moving everything, it's incredible.
Fantastic! The kids are loving it. It's a squeeze, but it's worth it.
And as we approached the 100th anniversary of the Gallipoli landing, our Anzacs were honoured.
I've never seen a crowd like this in Perth, ever. And people stopped today as a mark of respect to the Anzacs, 100 years since the landing at Gallipoli. Very poignant moment, and thank you to the people of Perth for supporting this event in the way you have.
Before long, the Giants were ready to take one last stroll around Langley Park. As they marched down a packed Riverside Drive, it was standing room only. With more than a quarter of Perth in the CBD, it's no surprise our train struggled again. Standing room only, and many forced to wait for the next train. The PTA says it put all resources it could towards the event, but admitted nothing would have prepared them for the surge. For some, the heat and the huge crowds were too much. 150 people were treated by paramedics, most for heat-related illnesses.
This event is now reaching its final stages, and while it stretched the transport network and pushed the city to its limits, one thing is obvious: nothing has ever captured the imagination of Perth quite like these Giants.
Soon their final parade around Langley Park came to an end. Across the 3 days, the Giants were seen by almost all of Perth, an incredible 1.4 million people. Their departing gift, one final aerial display, before they took their seats on a waiting barge, surrounded by the Perth community. Shrouded in smoke, the Giants said goodbye, but Perth made sure they weren't alone as they made their final journey up the river.
And this afternoon, as the Giants made their way from Perth to Fremantle, Ben Hennessy's witnessed the lot. Ben, in the past hour, they've been packed up and made ready for their final journey home.
They have, Liam, and there was a fair crowd down here to see them on their way as well. Now, from here in the next couple of days, the two Giants will be jumping on a ship and heading back to their base, which is the city of Nantes in France. And joining them will be the 90 support crew that came over and helped bring these Giants to life. Now, the question on a lot of people's minds now is when will the Giants be returning? Unfortunately, there is nothing locked in at this stage. It's all a matter of funding. Of course, this most recent event did cost $5 million, but given the response, you'd expect most people would be asking the question. Hopefully, they will be coming back in the coming years ahead. Lou.
We never see them in France.
Each lifelike step is controlled by a team of puppeteers. To move one of the diver's giant legs requires 2 men to hold onto a rope and jump off a platform. A well-rehearsed routine that's repeated over and over.
And so this is it, the first time that both of the Giants have walked through the streets together. Perth's biggest ever public event, and this is turning out to be a fitting climax to this wonderful experience.
The crowds lined Riverside Drive as the Giants made their final steps towards the barge that would carry them away from the city. Carefully loaded onto the deck, they sailed down the Swan River, a flotilla of boats shadowing their trip towards Fremantle. Not since Australia's defence of the America's Cup has this been seen in Perth. The Narrows Bridge proved a perfect spot to say goodbye to the giant diver and his little niece. A city-changing street show seen by 1.4 million people since Friday. A giant success story that may never be repeated on these shores.
And Rob Scott, you followed their every move since they arrived on Friday.
I sure did, Sam, and what a show it's been. It cost $5.4 million to bring those Giants to Perth for the 3 days they were here. Expensive, yes, but for all those who came down to see them in person, it was well worth it. And with so many people in the city at one time, our public transport system was put under immense pressure. But as the Lord Mayor, Lisa Scafidi, said today, she thinks we handled things as well as can be expected. She spoke to Alexis Donkin.
It wasn't just the Giants who put on a show over 3 days. We did too, 1.4 million of us. Of course, with record crowds came record pressure on our roads and public transport system. Over the weekend alone, 500,000 people used buses and trains. It was an hour-long wait to board a train at Leederville at peak times.
We're on a pilgrimage. That's what it feels like.
It was just quite busy on the bus, but it was okay. It's part of it, isn't it, girls?
Yes. For Angela Ellard and her 3 children, a crash on the Kwinana freeway made the hour-long drive from home to the city a 2-hour journey, but it was worth the wait.
We drove from Pinjarra.
Oh wow, so it was a big drive for you to come down today.
Yeah.
How long was it? Were there a lot of cars on the road? Was it pretty busy?
Yeah, there was an accident as well, so yeah.
The numbers are in, and this has officially been the biggest street festival ever in Perth's history. Today, Premier Colin Barnett addressed the crowds where he thanked people for taking part. He also said this has really been a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
And you, who have come out in your hundreds of thousands to support the Giants and to commemorate the Anzacs, I thank you very much.
Massive crowds and more than 20 road closures across the CBD caused some frustration. But the Lord Mayor says we behaved exceptionally well at our biggest community event yet.
The crowds have moved around with relative ease, and I think people have had the right attitude, which has been so heartening. So I do want to say thank you.
Alexis Donkin, 7 News.
Expectations before the Giants landed in Perth were that 1 million people would come to see them. Rob, the numbers far exceeded that.
Yes, they did, Sam. And if you can judge success by the number of people who came to see an event, then without a doubt, this was an absolute triumph. Official figures put the crowd attendance at 1.4 million. That is a staggering statistic when you hear the population of WA is just 2.5 million. So effectively, more than half of all West Australians came down to see the Giants since they arrived in the city on Friday. And while the buses and trains did struggle to cope at times, it really didn't matter. The crowds were captivated, and I think it's fair to say for all those people who missed out, they may just be regretting it a little bit extra tonight, because who knows when or even if the Giants will ever be back in Perth. Sam?
It was a sight to see. Thanks for that, Rob. Welcome back to 7 News. We're at the end of an amazing weekend. More than 1.4 million people lined the city's streets to see the most popular event ever put on in Perth. Rob Scott has been following the Giants for the last 3 days. Rob, they've left their mark on the city, haven't they?
They certainly have, Sam. It was a massive success. 1.4 million people, as you said, came to the streets of Perth to watch the Giants. That's more than half the population of Western Australia. A staggering statistic when you realise that they were there to see what were effectively just 2 giant puppets. But once you see them in person, you understand what makes them so captivating. Their movements are so lifelike, you soon forget that they're being controlled by men and women pulling on ropes and pulleys. And the pictures from the 7 News chopper of all the boats following the Giants barge as it made its way along the Swan River were just incredible. Unfortunately, the show is now over and the Giants have disappeared. It cost a small fortune to bring them here, $5.4 million. So who knows when or even if they'll ever be back on our shores. I'm glad I got to see them. Sam?
Perth has farewelled its giant visitors after 3 days of events seen by an estimated 1.4 million people. A huge crowd gathered to watch the Giants' final performance, which commemorated 100 years since the Anzacs landed at Gallipoli.
It was a giant goodbye seen by a giant crowd. They watched from land, branches and from the water as the diver and the little girl boarded a barge and floated down the Swan River, drawing to a close an event that has captured the imagination of a city.
I don't think even we could have believed the way that people would respond to this performance.
People are here today in their hundreds of thousands. I have never seen a crowd like this in Perth, ever.
People came from far and wide to see the event, and extra trains were scheduled to help the transport system cope. The Giants were reunited yesterday after days of searching for one another through the city's streets. They came together as the sun set in Perth for a ceremony featuring Indigenous performers. The Giants woke up this morning to find themselves surrounded.
We are very excited. We woke up at 5:30 this morning.
The little girl Giant was also feeling energetic and put on a show.
It's incredible. People giving up and down ropes and sliding around and off ladders and, it is a very, very impressive performance.
The Giants then formed part of the Anzac commemorations, standing with military cadets and veterans as they paid tribute to fallen soldiers.
Now all that's left to do is to pack everything away, leaving Langley Park to the little people.
The event marks the start of the Perth International Arts Festival, which runs until March. Courtney Bembridge, ABC News.
The Giants are coming to the streets of Perth. Be part of Australia's biggest arts event, an extraordinary story told over 3 days. The Giants is a free event for the Perth International Arts Festival.